Welcome to another episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CPGGUYS podcast. I am one of the aforementioned CPG guys. I'm your co-host, Peter V.S. Bond. I'm also the Vice President of Retail Strategy at Power Reviews. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host. He is an e-commerce luminary. He is an entrepreneur. He is one of the smartest guys I know. He is the Moet to my Chandon, the Labrador to my Newfoundland, as opposed to Newfoundland. It's a Canadian thing. And he is the scary to my posh. Please join me in welcoming the man who goes by one name. He's so famous. Sri, how you doing today?
Hardly, but doing awesome. And thank you for doing this with me. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to get started on the econometrics of supply chain.
We're in the middle of our series on the economics and the profitability of e-commerce. We just finished episode 1. If you made it through that, it was dry, but it was necessary. Now let's get into some of the core components of the overall calculation of profitability.
Yes, sir.
And the first thing you need to think about in e-commerce is supply chain.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to go through that, and we're going to help our customers think about what they need to consider in supply chain models, and then ultimately the challenges that they're facing. So let's go through this list by list. There are quite a number of different supply chain situations. The first one is where you just have pure play customers. The second one is an omnichannel customer. So pure play is when they sell one method. It's typically all they're doing is selling
Amazon.
Yes, Amazon 1P is pure play. Omnichannel is more like a Walmart or a Kroger, where they are selling through a number of different mechanisms. Then I have this concept of a 3P marketplace where I'm outsourcing it, and that's a very interesting one. So that's where my product is available on a marketplace like Amazon, but I'm not selling my product to Amazon. They may be helping me with the fulfillment in one service or another, but the actual taking it out of the pallet and putting it into an eCommerce and packaging it up and getting it out. Amazon might pick it up at my third-party partner's outsourced door, but it really is outsourced. That is a great example. PharmaPacks being a really preeminent player in this space. The next one is 3P Marketplace, where you are partially outsourced.
Yes, sir.
So maybe you're using an agency to do some of the work on optimization and everything else there on the marketplace. That is a great example that you need to do that. And then a 3P marketplace where I just wash my hands of it, I sell it to them, and it's their job to completely own that process. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, then we have to think about direct to consumer. The first one is obviously fully owned. Now we've talked about this in the past, but we think that probably the best example, and manufacturers that are skilled to do fully owned direct to consumer are more often than not DSD companies, because they're already structured to do picking and eaches.
Absolutely. Or
breaking down case packs from pallet quantities. And then there's D2C partially outsourced. So maybe there's some of the service that I'm doing. Maybe I'm doing the picking, but then someone else is doing the fulfillment. I don't have to worry about that. And then D2C where it's just completely outsourced. And then of course, B2B. Now B2B is a really interesting one, and there are certain categories. I know Frito's a good example where they do a lot of B2B. We've talked about alcohol being B2B because of the 3-tier system, and necessitates or promotes that kind of activity. And then lastly, what is your model for supply chain when it's a distributor?
Yeah, I want to just give an example of that one.
Or a liquidator.
Categories like fragrances, where when you're creating an innovation, you rarely meet the MOQ. You always have excess inventory.
How do you get rid of it?
You go to a liquidator, or you go to a distributor made for this purpose who might also be operating a website like FragranceNet. Great example. They're here to liquidate, and they're here to get rid of the product.
Sometimes you offshore that. You send it outside the country.
All kinds of mechanisms.
Liquidation is a catch-all.
Yeah, but the thing with offshore, I want to caution people about is to watch out for rules and regulations. Not every country's rules and regulations are the same. But yeah, they run it on, they liquidate it, could be on Groupon.
Yeah,
and
like,
you can't say no, otherwise you're going to destroy the product.
Yeah, what are you going to do with all those Yankees World Series champion T-shirts that are useless when the Dodgers win? You got to get rid of them somewhere.
The same the Dodgers have been doing for hundreds of years when the Yankees have more than 20 championships.
We're still on that. We're still on that. All right, so hopefully there we've given you some examples of different types of supply chain situations that you need to, that you will probably confront as you're building out your e-commerce strategy.
Yeah, so why don't we, Peter, jump into the world of what are all the common challenges and opportunities seen across the board, and then we'll try our best to make this unique for these different models.
Sounds good. All right, so let me ask you this, Sri. First question that typically comes up is, what do I need to do in supply chain e-commerce?
That's a good one, Peter, because as naive as that question sounds, every company is asking this question. Like the consulting work I'm doing now across the board, many are asking me, okay, we've got a handle on our Amazon P&L, we've got a handle on our Walmart Omnichannel, we know what to do with content, UGC. What do I do from a supply chain standpoint?
I'll stop right now and I'll just say this, that you and I know we both agree on. You will not succeed at e-commerce if you don't ask questions.
1000%. You have to be deeply intellectual curious.
Don't be proud.
Yes.
Don't be arrogant. It's okay to show that you don't know the answer. You want to ask people who know.
Succeeding in e-commerce requires incredible humility.
Yeah, a lot of it.
So what do I need to do in supply chain e-commerce? The fact that you've asked that question is a good thing, which means you're ready to actually absorb an answer.
Exactly.
Embark on your supply chain journey not by running the race alone as a supply chain team, because you're going to have ideas dime to a dozen. You're going to go to conferences. You're going to hear from other people who are going to tell you what to do. Your best partner in this journey of supply chain is your Amazon team.
Yeah.
Start with them, what their needs are.
They've been doing this for years.
They've been doing this for years. Get a relationship directly with the Amazon supply chain team as well, not just your sales team. Then eventually evolve from there with the learnings. Try to find productivity in chargebacks, and that can help the P&L from an econometric ecosystem in a significant way. That can create productivity, which then can be used to create multi-packs through the innovation cycle, and you make marketing your partner. But the message here is a simple one. Do not try to run the race alone. Start with your Amazon team, work through the commercial teams into your marketing team.
So I heard you mention learning. How do I educate? Because I suspect when I drop this on my supply chain team, there's going to be sticker shock associated with it. So what do I need to do to educate my supply chain team so that they're not freaking out over this?
Yep. The clear answer to this is sending your team to a supply chain conference is going to be a self-fulfilling conversation, a self-fulfilling prophecy of what you want to hear. Because you're going to talk about dimensions, weights, metrics, box sizes, but you're not going to solve the big problem, which is how can I be successful at a Walmart or an Amazon or in D2C. So the best way to educate the supply chain team is be best friends with I'm going to come back to with your Amazon team. If you can be best friends with your Amazon team, they're going to give you the education that you need to, which is all encompassing, even Peter, D2C.
Okay, that's good. Next question is every locale, and by locale I mean every region, every country, every business unit, is it all the same?
So Peter, absolutely not. Every business unit, every locale for your supply chain strategy absolutely is not going to look the same. Why is this the case? It's because if you take the US market or the US region, what's prominent is the Amazon ecosystem, followed by now growth in D2C, but really the omnichannel click and collect, which has surged in the last 6 months. Each one of those presents different set of challenges and opportunities. But if you look at Western Europe, it's an e-commerce market largely shaped by click and collect only. So if you look at Tesco, things of that nature, which means the skill set there is really of replenishment in store and forecasting. If you're not good at it, good luck. Whereas in US, it's last mile delivery. And then when I jump to Asia, which has a massively distributed and fragmented model for supply chain, the skill set comes in understanding how to fulfill, period, across the board. And you're looking at an Alibaba in China, which is your really D2C on a B2B platform, which means you have to have D2C, but with scale in the case packs business model. but in the case packs business model.
Yeah.
So every business unit's changes and econometrics are radically different. You cannot copy the supply chain strategy from one region to another as a vanilla. There are plenty of tweaks along the way. Can you learn? Yes.
All right, another one we hear from a lot of our listeners, which is they're just struggling with chargebacks and penalties.
Yeah. This is very common in the industry. It happens a lot across the board.
But it happens in brick and mortar.
Thank you, Peter. And that's exactly what I was about to say. When you struggle with chargebacks and penalties in brick and mortar, what do? You
pay them.
And what else do?
You try and figure out how to fix your system so that you're not incurring them.
We're going to cover this as part of our trade and allowances episode 5, where we're going to talk through all the supply chain or several supply chain chargebacks.
But it's a cost involved in supply chain that you just have to deal with.
You have to deal with it, and
you have to accept it. You have to deal with it.
You have to deal with it and attack it aggressively and look for productivity by lowering those expenses. The only way you can do that is by having a strategy on how to do it.
Yeah. What if my prioritization of the e-commerce supply is pretty low in my customer hierarchy?
Yeah, so this is a very tough one to answer, but I do have a recommendation.
Yep.
So what happens here is often I've noticed that when it comes to inventory prioritization, and Amazon or D2C will be at the bottom of the pile.
So all the other retailers, the customers, they get
based on size.
They get shipment. They get shipment before.
Yeah. So what I want to remind our listeners here, especially supply chain listeners here, why you need to fight for e-commerce to move to the top, or tier 1 when it comes to inventory allocation is, when you go out of stock on e-com, you lose the listing.
Yeah.
When you go out of stock in the store shelf, you don't lose your listing.
No.
And so if you lose your listing, I think of that as a death warrant.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, e-commerce has to be on the top tier of your prioritization when it comes to supply chain inventory planning. There's no debate.
That is some very good advice, Sri. And how do you manage for kind of peaks and valleys from a capacity perspective? You do it in traditional brick and mortar. You've got to be able to do it in e-com.
How do we do it in brick and mortar? What we do is the supply chain team gets a full view of the promotional activity taking place at a retailer. That could be a rollback. That could be a NCP, a National Consumer Promotion coupon. That could be a specific event running at
That's like an FSI, right?
Like an FSI.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is usually the
freestanding insert. I threw out an acronym. I didn't define it. Bad Peter. Freestanding inserts. Those are the 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper that have copy and a little cutout coupon that used to go in the Sunday newspaper. Well, they still do.
I occasionally get them, by the way.
Yeah, I do.
So
I love buying that Sunday newspaper. It's still that. You and I are old school. It's the tactile experience.
I like to touch it, feel it. I like my USA Today when I travel.
There you go. McPaper.
Absolutely. McPaper. There you go. So peaks and valleys, you got to handle it the same way. And what's not happening today, which is why this is a common challenge, is in today's ecosystem, your Amazon team and your pure play teams do not engage with supply chain with the same energy that a Walmart team does. Usually the Walmart brick and mortar team, the CVS, any customer team is going to have someone from supply chain as their key contact.
Yeah.
Listening into their weekly sales meetings, understanding the promotional activity. Amazon team, ball's in your court. Please do this. Welcome your supply chain team in.
Get them in.
And then they will be able to forecast much better and avoid this problem.
All right, how about managing for omnichannel click and collect?
So this is a very unique and tricky one.
Click and collect has many different names. Some call it BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. Some call it BOPAC, buy online, pick up at
I've
curb.
Heard click and pick.
Yes, click and pick.
Curbside pickup.
Yeah.
All kinds of names, but at the end of the day, this is when you buy online and you're going to a retail location of some sort.
You're going to some other location to fulfill.
To fulfill the product.
Yeah.
So in this sort of scenario, why is this even here in the first place? And the best place to learn is call your European counterpart. They are experts in click and collect, because a good 20% of the retail business model in Western Europe is already click and collect. It's the majority of e-commerce today. And so you can learn from them very easily on what they had to encounter. But here's the most important piece of this that you're going to have to quickly adapt and learn. It's forecasting.
Yeah.
Because click and pick is coming off the shelf,
right?
Which means whatever you're sending to the customer warehouse for your brick and mortar business, that's the
they're
one
siphoning off of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, one of my favorite, pack sizes and these virtual bundles that are starting to emerge. Let's define them.
Yeah, econometrics, direct impact.
Yeah.
Because most of the time what's going to happen is your pure play team or your Walmart team, .com team, or any of your .com team, customer teams, what they're going to do is they're going to find if I sell an individual unit, I incur a lot of fees because of the fulfillment costs. So why don't I build a 3-pack?
Okay.
3-packs are great because you're getting the sale of 3 units at the same time.
Yeah.
3-packs are bad because what does it do for the brand equity?
Sure.
And then because it's an afterthought in the process, econometrically, you are outsourcing it for trade customization, which means you're adding another extra cost and a burden to the P&L.
Makes sense.
So if you're creating a multi-pack, you are adding cost to the ecosystem for sure. How do you avoid this cost econometrically? Or how do you improve and not create this line item burden? The best way to do it is, we talked about education earlier. It is supply chain's responsibility with R&D and marketing that when you create innovation, you address, do I need an e-commerce pack on day one? The answer doesn't have to be yes every single time. The answer could very well be no. In which case, if the answer is no, there was a reason you said no, and if the e-commerce team comes to you and asks you later in the pipeline for it, you still say no, and here's why, because you've already answered it up front. That's how you create e-commerce P&L product favorability in this equation. But I want to address virtual bundles. Virtual bundles are a good thing.
Can you give me an example of a virtual bundle?
A virtual bundle is when you don't physically bundle together products via shrink
You
wrap
pick
or
them
a box.
individually, you put them in a box. The consumer buys it as
on the website, they buy it as a bundle, but then the retailer is really putting 3 or 4 things in a box. It's like a trade up into a basket. Regimen packs are a great example. You don't have to create a predetermined regimen pack. You could sell a regimen pack.
It's almost like taking a recipe and dumping all the items into a single trend, and you're paying one price.
You nailed it.
But in the back end, it's the retailer just picking a whole bunch of items.
You nailed it, Peter.
Yeah. Okay. Innovation.
Yes, so we've addressed this a little bit. As in, I do believe strongly, my own personal humble learnings, multiple categories, it came back to the same thing. Innovation in 2020, you must answer the question when you create innovation, what is the role of the SKU in e-com? It shouldn't be the other way. This SKU was created for brick and mortar, how do I hammer it through e-com, or let me just not even do it in e-com, or just keep it in brick and mortar. It's how and what is the role of e-com, including what is the pack size.
And lastly, this is something you're going to hear when you start talking about it from internal stakeholders. Should I even support D2C?
Yeah, so I'm glad we're asking and addressing the question, should I support D2C? Because all of a sudden the fulfillment cost line item can be close to 20% of a P&L that
they're not used to seeing that. They're not used to seeing those numbers.
And can you imagine the dilution when that happens?
Yeah.
So what's in this D2C 20% dilution? Number one, there's fulfillment. That's pick, pack, ship. All 3 pieces. And depending on service providers you use, this could also be inbound, outbound, pallet storage, lots of complications. We'll address this in our D2C episode. There are so many pieces in the P&L that can completely radically break it down, which leads to the question, I'm a supply chain leader, should I support D2C? The answer is, in 2020, commercially, D2C still remains for a brand the best vehicle to engage one-on-one and create a CRM, a consumer relationship, customer relationship,
that first party data,
ecosystem, that first party data, loyalty base. So you have to learn it.
If I were to step inside of your shoes, I might even say this is non-negotiable.
Thank you for saying that, Peter. It is non-negotiable, but I always think of D2C performance with purpose. Ask the question as a supply chain leader, why do you want to be in the business of D2C? What is the purpose? If it's to build the first party data, then you have to accept that there's going to be a dilution in the P&L. The answer to why I'm getting into D2C of an existing brand and SKUs should never be it's going to be 8% of the channel. It will be dilutive. 100%.
Wow. Okay, so we have really broken down the whole supply chain component of profitability. Great second episode, Sri.
Thank you, Peter.
Can't wait for the next one, and it'll be your favorite media. Coming up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'll say that the actual documents that are associated with it, including all of these talking points that we went through. We're going to have it in one concise document. You'll find it, a link to it on cpgguys.com. Please go there for all of our content, podcasts, videos, glossary, other favorite podcasts, all of that. We're going to have to start saying what are our favorite TV shows pretty soon, Sri, because people want to know.
I already declared somewhere in an episode that I started with Saved by the Bell.
That's true. That's true. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode. And we look forward to part 3 of the profitability series here on the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Yep.